Socrates. Socrates, often regarded as the founder of Western philosophy, never wrote any texts himself. Most of what we know about him comes from his student Plato, who recorded his ideas in the form of dialogues. He is best known for the Socratic method and Socratic irony. The Socratic method unfolds through dialogue, using short questions and answers in which Socrates and his conversation partners explore different aspects of an issue or abstract concept, often reaching a point where they realize they cannot clearly define what they initially believed they understood. Socrates would frequently claim ignorance about the subject being discussed in order to expose contradictions or weaknesses in the arguments of others. This technique is known as Socratic irony. His theory of virtue holds that all virtues are fundamentally one, as they are forms of knowledge. According to Socrates, people act wrongly out of ignorance rather than deliberate evil, which relates to the famous idea that no one does wrong willingly. One of his most well-known sayings is, "I know that I know nothing." Plato is best known for his theory of forms, which argues that the material world is not the ultimate reality, but merely a reflection or copy of a higher, more perfect realm. For example, although we see many different individual trees of various types and appearances, they are all imperfect representations of the ideal form of a tree. This form is not any specific tree, but a perfect, eternal, and unchanging essence that contains all the qualities that make something recognizable to us as a tree. This idea is often illustrated through the allegory of the cave. In this story, Plato describes prisoners who have been chained inside a cave their entire lives, facing a blank wall. Behind them is a fire, and between the fire and the prisoners, objects pass by, casting shadows onto the wall. The prisoners see only these shadows and believe them to be reality. However, the shadows are merely distorted images of the true objects. In this analogy, the shadows represent the limited reality we perceive through our senses, while the objects near the fire symbolize the true forms, which can only be understood through reason and philosophical thinking. Aristotle. For Plato, the form is separate from the actual thing that imitates it. For Aristotle, however, form is still what phenomena are based on, but it exists within a particular object. Plato argued that some forms do not depend on specific things. For example, even if no perfectly good action exists, the form of good would still exist as a true form. Aristotle disagreed with this view, arguing that all forms are instantiated at some point in time and that there are no forms independent of existing things. In addition, Aristotle differed from Plato regarding the location of forms. Plato claimed that forms exist separately from the things that participate in them, while Aristotle maintained that forms exist within each thing to which they apply. So, according to Aristotle, the form of an apple exists within each individual apple, rather than in a separate world of forms. This view is known as immanent realism. Aristotle also believed that the world is composed of 5 elements: earth, water, fire, air, and ether. He thought ether was spread throughout the heavens and made up the celestial spheres and stars. Epicurus. Epicurus argued that the purpose of philosophy is to live, and to help others live, happy and tranquil lives by removing pain and fear. He believed that the greatest obstacle to happiness, and one of the main reasons humans turned to philosophy, was the fear of death. He offered a solution by claiming that death should not be feared. When we exist, death is not present, and when death is present, we no longer exist. He taught that the universe is made up of 2 fundamental things, matter and void. Matter consists of atoms, tiny particles that possess only basic and unchanging properties such as shape, size, and weight. Epicurus reasoned that for the universe to endure, its fundamental components must be unchangeable. Otherwise, everything would ultimately dissolve. He maintained that there is an infinite supply of atoms, though only a finite number of types, along with an infinite amount of void. Because atoms are infinite, there must also be infinitely many worlds. Epicureans also believed that the senses operate through atoms. Objects constantly emit particles that interact with the observer, producing sensations like sight, smell, and sound. Although these emitted atoms do not literally possess qualities such as color or sound, the way they move and interact causes us to experience those sensations. For example, atoms are not themselves red, but their arrangement and motion can lead us to perceive the color red. Due to his strong reliance on sensory experience as a source of knowledge, Epicurus is often described as an empiricist. Pythagoras. Pythagoras was a mathematician who believed that the universe could be understood through numbers and their relationships. The Pythagoreans were devoted to discovering abstract principles, which helped shape and develop early Greek idealist philosophy. They also taught the immortality of the soul and the idea of reincarnation. One of the most famous contributions of Pythagoreanism is the Pythagorean theorem. Diogenes. Diogenes is considered one of the founders of cynicism, a philosophy that teaches that money, power, fame, and other conventional desires are misguided pursuits, and that virtue alone leads to true happiness. According to cynicism, happiness is achieved by living in accordance with nature, following one's natural reason, and adopting a simple, self-sufficient lifestyle free from social constraints. For this reason, cynics aim to live with only the bare essentials and practice shamelessness by openly rejecting social norms. Diogenes himself owned very few possessions, traditionally said to be just a cloak, a staff, and a small bag, and he was known for behaving in public without concern for social expectations, even in ways that shocked others. The Cynics are also associated with the early idea of cosmopolitanism. When Diogenes was asked where he came from, he famously replied that he was a citizen of the world. I'll be making other philosophy videos. Subscribe to see them.